I still, to this day, one of my prouder moments professionally is I did not even have a job lined up of any kind, and CNN was offering me money to stay on in 2016 after Trump won, and I was like, under no circumstances am I ever working for your network again. Like, I'm out of here. I want no part of this whatsoever. I would rather have to just go get a normal job than continue to work in media for CNN. Clay, there are a lot of these people who are formerly on the right who went to these places, and they made, speaking of the devil, they made a deal with the devil. They made a Faustian bargain to go do things for the amusement of libs. The elite media over at the New York Times and the CNN, although you see CNN's ratings recently, I mean, there are like season 6 DIY Cabins of Manitoba shows that are getting more viewers than CNN. I do love those DIY shows, to be fair.
They can't. I mean, Buck, to your point on CNN, they need Donald Trump so desperately, and MSNBC too. They don't exist. He is the one-man stimulus package for their ratings. If he doesn't exist, there is nothing for them, and it's why. And
they also made a decision, which is, a man for all seasons. There's the argument, about would you get rid of all of the laws if it meant that you could get the devil? And then he turns around and he says, and I'm paraphrasing, and some of you know the quote better than me. Well, once you've cut down all the laws of England to get the devil himself, what are you going to do when the devil turns on you, right? What are you going to do once you've done that? And the media, the Democrat media, abandoned the pretense of, I think it always was a pretense, but they at least abandoned even the make-believe framework of neutrality, journalism, news gathering against Trump. So it's entirely understandable that now, to your point, without Trump, what do they exist to do? Well, they already told us they're propaganda organs. They already told us that they aren't actually unbiased. And it's interesting because also now that they ran with some of these narratives as long as they did, you're seeing some of these big name journos coming out and saying, a number of them, yeah, I was really wrong. Because they have the game is up, right? They can't play it anymore. A perfect example, Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman is a Nobel laureate in economics who is a smug, delusional leftist who is more consistently wrong on economic policy questions than any human being I can think of off the top of my head, right? Clay, he just said, yeah, it turns out I was wrong about inflation. And I know we're all supposed to clap for him and say, oh, okay. But yeah, spending trillions of dollars that when you're already 28 trillion in debt is going to make inflation worse.
Not only was he wrong about inflation, he was wrong about the entire Trump economy, too. To your point, if you are an expert in one thing and you get consistently everything wrong in the field of which you are considered to be an expert, how do you still have a job? How are there not consequences for being immensely wrong when your job is to be an opinionist for the New York Times on economics, and everything you say about economics is wrong? In any other job, you would lose it, right? If you are a football coach and you lose every game, even if you're considered to be an expert in football coaching, you get fired. Our industry, when it comes to media opinionists and being an expert in something and being wrong all the time, there don't appear to be real consequences, right? Like Paul Krugman is a great example at the New York Times, wrong about everything. And not only wrong in a way where if he had been right, he would have been even more wrong.
If economists were as smart as they want people to believe, they wouldn't be teaching undergrads. They'd be running multi-billion-dollar hedge funds. I'm just telling you the truth, folks. Okay?
No,
that's reality.
That's right.
And
if you, the smartest people in the field of finance either run hedge funds or they're in private equity, right?
Yes.
Because that's where they make money based on actually having to put their principles to the test.
Tenured PhDs in economics. Look, teaching is a very valuable thing in itself, but this notion that somebody who has a PhD in economics from Princeton or is teaching at Princeton with a PhD has a better understanding of the economy than, say, the guy who starts a massively successful chain of national restaurants or something. I mean, who was it recently? Was it Andy Puzder who came out recently and just said the Biden administration has no one who understands business, has no one who understands actual market forces. I think it was. So
it's also us.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true too. But so what? By the way, it's not just so. There's a whole list here, and hat tip the New York Post for compiling this. But it's all starting to happen. I don't think this is happening because of any inherent honesty or sense of honor that these individuals have. I think they've just realized that the game is up and they have to pivot in some way. Bret Stephens, somebody used to write for the Wall Street Journal, left to go to the New York Times, has admitted that effectively he was dripping with condescension for Trump voters. And that a lot of what Trump, and this is a guy who was supposed to be a conservative, was writing at the Wall Street Journal, a lot of what the Trump voters were feeling about how the apparatus and the elites thought of them and treated them was confirmed by people like Bret Stephens, who abandoned his post to speak the truth to them and defend them at the same time. He just decided to do things for the amusement of smarmy libs. And he's now coming out to say, yeah, it was nasty what I said about Trump supporters. He said they were appalling. I mean, he said Trump supporters were appalling. And, that was another example of this. I mean, I still, to this day, one of my prouder moments professionally is I did not even have a job lined up of any kind. And CNN was offering me money to stay on in 2016 after Trump won. And I was like, under no circumstances am I ever working for your network again. Like, I'm out of here. I want no part of this whatsoever. I would rather have to just go get a normal job than continue to work in media for CNN. Clay, there are a lot of these people who are formerly on the right who went to these places and speaking of the devil, they made a deal with the devil. They made a Faustian bargain to go do things for the amusement of libs.
One of the conversations, and maybe we can talk about this for a minute when we come back. One of the conversations I've been having is, to what extent was Trump an exception in terms of the way that CNN and MSNBC behaved? And to what extent is, even if Trump is not the nominee, the new reality is every single Republican candidate for national office is an awful human being who is the devil incarnate. I think they have 8 of them. 8 different columnists wrote on the things that they had most gotten wrong, if I'm not mistaken, total. Yes. And they're still rolling them out as we continue.
Some of them, the Bret Stephens one, I think he's realized that he made a Faustian bargain. He left I don't know him, I just know his work. And I know that he's one of these guys who became a never Trumper, who then seethed with disdain of all Trump voters, and then thought that, getting a pat on the head from the New York Times was going to, no, it's not a good idea. They have disdain for him. That's what he's probably figured out. And now he's a man with no party, essentially, and is doing the bidding of libs, pretending to be a conservative. So that's what happened there. Paul Krugman is a joke. I mean, if you invest based on Paul Krugman pronouncements, you're going to lose all your money. I mean, so, Paul Krugman is not somebody that anybody who cares about being right listens to. He's also a loon. He hates guns, and he knows nothing. Michelle Goldberg, though, this one was interesting, also New York Times, said she got it wrong when she called for Al Franken's resignation from the Senate without an investigation. I just want to know, is that something now that's a rule that we could extend to Republicans as well? Or is it just, man, we probably shouldn't have thrown Franken under the bus because he was a Democrat, and what did we really get out of that?
Well, and look, I understand that she's saying, hey, I got that wrong. She wasn't the reason that Al Franken had to resign. The reason Al Franken had to resign was because his own Senate colleagues.
Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, yes.
She was the one who was leading the Pitchfork Brigade. And in the grand scheme of things, let's be honest, what Al Franken was accused of is, I think, one of the many things that he lost his job over Me Too. And now there's an irony, because certainly Democrats were all about Me Too and everything else until the chickens came home to roost. And there's also an incredible irony, I think, that Johnny Depp has just basically ended Me Too because he bankrupted Amber Heard, and she's appealing that ruling, by the way, right now. But I mean, look, Al Franken being photographed 15 years ago making a joke, which may have been inappropriate, with somebody on a military jet, it was just basically him pretending to make out with her while
Well,
she was
I think the bigger problem was the forced making out with some other women, if I remember, which
right.
That's not.
I mean, I'm not claiming that Al Franken was an incredible guy, but the standard of if you have ever had any woman who is upset about anything that you've ever done, therefore you are ineligible, like non-criminal behavior, right? You're ineligible to ever be a politician. I think is kind of a crazy standard, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent.
I think the bigger trend right now that these "what I got wrong" columns from New York Times columnists is that the Democrat media doesn't have anything to champion and doesn't have. I mean, when I say anything, the Biden administration, they can't be cheerleaders because it's too depressing and too incompetent, and they don't have Trump to attack. So what are they really doing? What do they really represent? On a day-to-day basis for their readers? This is true at CNN. This is true at the New York Times. They have to pivot. They have to shift because this all in against the right, all in for the left, it doesn't really work for these outlets when you have an administration that's falling. For the Obama administration, they can get away with it. For the Biden administration, not so much.
I think they're looking at the Pew Research came out, or maybe it was Gallup that came out with the research just in the last couple of 10 days or so, showing that newspapers and television news had reached lowest levels of respect and support and trust basically in any of our lives. And so what they are recognizing is the Trump administration for the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC was a sugar high. It existed, but it was not sustainable because even if Trump had won in 2020 and was still in office right now, Trump is eventually no longer going to be able to be in office. So they sold this idea of the great Satan as they were pivoting to a subscription model. It's actually kind of a fascinating business analysis story. And I think they're trying to pull now blood out of a stone because everybody who hated Trump has already subscribed to the New York Times, right? If you hate Trump, you're already a Washington Post subscriber. And now they're looking around and they're saying, wait a minute, where are the rest of our subscribers? And people they're trying to
I also
be
think,
persuadable
I think that
are
they
done with them.
believed that they would be in a position to really rub it in the faces of the mask opponents, vaccine mandate opponents. I think that they were expecting going into this midterm to say, oh, look at those stupid red states. Look at Florida with its super high death rate and everyone fleeing. I think they believed that. And now the reality has sunk in that is the opposite of reality, that the red states are putting out no vacancy signs because they're so full because they've handled the economy better. They handled COVID better. They're pushing back on vaccine mandates was the right move. I mean, all of it. So basically, I mean, the left is in free fall right now, Clay.
They got everything wrong. And the more it mattered, the more egregiously wrong they were. And I don't know how they pull themselves out. And I think you're right. I think this is why the New York Times is trying to have all these mea culpas saying, hey, we got all these things wrong, because no one trusts them at all anymore.
They should have a new columnist called Captain Obvious. We got everything wrong.